Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sean Farrell, and today we're going to be talking a lot about licensing. Not always the most exciting topic in the world of business, but it's part of what we need to run them. And just every single year we go through typically a procurement phase where we're used to buying these long-term agreements of different types. And there's just really a new way to look at licensing and really have a strategic mindset around how we build a strategic licensing plan. So with that said, the presentation is going to go a little something like this. It's really how to build a strategic licensing plan, how to plan for it, develop it, and then long-term vision-wise how to manage it. And we're going to talk through some of the changes that are happening in the market around software as a service, or simply put, pay-as-you-go licensing. I mean, finally, I think we're at the point now where what we saw in the Salesforce world and some of the other places, we're starting to see licensing being sold on a monthly basis. And with that said, we're starting to see licensing where you can consume it as you need it, almost down to the day. It's kind of like what we drove at home as the consumer, like the pay-per-views of the world where you got it when you needed it and didn't pay for it when you didn't. And as well, the question going forward is how do we, once we get it, manage it? And we'll talk about some tools today that are out there for licensing management and really anything from procurement to provisioning, and then, like I say, ongoing management and cost management at that. So with that said, real quick, a little bit about us. I'm the crazy-looking guy, I guess, on your left. So we're a technology company that's all over the Southwest United States, and we have customers globally throughout the world. So to keep it simple, when I started the company years ago, it was all about services and really enabling customers from a consulting service all the way down through ongoing outsourced IT and managed services. So I founded it in 2002. We're in the top 1% of cloud providers in the world in terms of products like Office 365 and Azure and Amazon Web Services. So that gives you a flavor for what we do. We're really about cloud to some extent. I still believe in a lot of on-premise or hybrid computing, but with that comes security through things like Active Directory and identity management, all the way up through other tools like how we manage the data center, so Microsoft System Center products and ongoing things like that around how we deploy, manage, monitor things of those sorts. So to give you an idea, we have about 1,500 businesses we manage worldwide, and you kind of see again where we're located. So here's what we're going to cover. I don't want to bore you guys, and if there's questions, definitely ask them over in the box, and I'll make sure I get them answered for you. And the big thing I want out of these, I've been asked to do a lot of them lately. I just came back from Las Vegas, and I was up in Northern California recently, and people just want to know what's happening, how do I buy, and why are these changes happening? And there's not a ton of transparency out there, so I hope I can shed some of that that light for you around how you do it today. So let's plan for innovation. That's what we're going to talk about today. Financially, talk about how to prepare for pay-as-you-go licensing. You've heard, I'm sure, the typical, do we do CapEx or OpEx? And if some companies insist that we want to put a capital budget together and buy our licensing and know what we're going to spend every year. Other companies insist that, hey, monthly we're going to pay for what we use. And it really, I don't know, it's really up to you how you do it. But OpEx and pay-as-you-go licensing seems to be the way that most organizations are going. And if you think about why? I mean, if you're a software builder or a software as a service product, as they would call it these days, or a platform as a service like Salesforce, well, of course you're going to want to make your money off these ongoing monthly reoccurring schedules. But for a lot of big companies like Microsoft and others who have sold you these upfront commitments, that's a challenge for them to change that financial model to where they're wondering, is that person going to use the license the next month, and am I going to get paid? So a lot of conflicting stories in the industry, and hopefully I can shed some light here today. So we're going to talk about budget for experimentation with advanced SKUs that are out there. Different departments wanting to try different software and look at some of the metrics of how they're using it to actually see if they're using it or not. I mean, so part of the funny thing about licensing is that we were so sort of used to buying all of it or this big bundle of it, but when we actually dug into, are people using it? They weren't. And so there's tools that help manage that today, and we'll talk about it. And then we'll talk about something called the consumption gap or consumption economics. There's a great book for anybody who's on the phone in IT. You got to get it. It's called Consumption Economics, and it really talks about how features and functions and technology are growing so fast And our consumers just can't keep up with it without the proper training. And we'll also talk about how the financial impact of that has changed. And then and then ROI with the strategic licensing plan in place. Can we actually save money? Can we actually pay by the drink or pay for what we use, and then when we're not using it, turn it off? In a perfect world, it should work that way, again, in my opinion. So again, the consumption gap, we'll start there. I think we all agree, software products, I mean, even down to the Outlooks and the Words of this world, the Salesforces, the CRM tools, the ERP tools, man, the features in these things are changing rapidly. I mean, I have people come up to me all the time and say, hey, Sean, I'm just looking for a Salesforce tool to be able to have my salespeople do like sort of the old tickler file thing where I can follow up and call and create meetings and things like that. But I tell them, I said, some of these programs are so built to have so many features in them that you may not take advantage of. I really want to, before we ever go out and try to sell you something, let's dive into what those look like and make sure we run through the taxonomy. But features and complexity just continue to go up. And then the consumer or the customer's ability to consume them, is always there's kind of a level to it. So back in the day, if you think about it, when you used to buy these big ERP systems or CRM systems, what happened? You paid up front, I don't know, $50,000 to $1 million up front. You were kind of stuck with it. And then features would go up. And then deployment time took, 6 months and onward, up to 2 years. And by the time you got through deployment, I'm guessing, there was the next version. So it was interesting when the CapEx cost was there where you knew you had to pay for it, you knew you weren't going to consume it that fast, and yet you had already kind of invested that money. In the world of platform software as a service or pay-as-you-go licensing, think about it. You're just paying for it as you use it. So I think as those features go up, you train your users, you're only going to pay for it as fast as you use it. So just like we talked about, one of the things that is unique is, we need to take these softwares that we're buying these days and make sure that at the same time we're enabling and training our users. And as we're going through those trainings, those migrations, those upgrades to the next version of the CRM system or the ERP platform or Office 365 or whatever it is, we also want to know that we're only paying for what we use when we use it. And that's happening today. And that's something that we're going to show you here in this PowerPoint or webinar. So plan for innovation. We met with IDC and Gartner and all these companies who actually go out there and interview kind of from an unbiased perspective CIOs and different IT consumers. And what we were trying to understand is, what is it people want these days, first of all? So what we heard through the studies was that first they want to get, obviously, discounts. Depending on how big of a company you are, and I know in the world of like Microsoft, they had enterprise agreements and still do. So depending on how big you are, you would get tiered pricing discounts for the enterprise agreement. And if you were really big, you get the highest discount, and of course, the smaller, the less. But consumers who are paying for licensing as you go also want the discounts just for even in the monthly licensing usage, and they are available, and we'll talk about them today, where you can actually get pay-as-you-go licensing at a discounted rate, and discounting, frankly, from what you see online at the retailers. If you went to Microsoft directly, for example, your ability to directly provision. So the next thing is it would be nice to be able to log on to a portal and be able to actually provision users and quickly get things going. And today there's tools to do that allow IT administrators to come on and spin up a computer for somebody and add licensing and software to it. And that's something that we've always done. But really, even down to let's just put it in the administrators, the procurement people's hand in a business and allow them to turn on and turn off users quickly. That's something that's being asked to really automate how we buy and I guess reduce our subscriptions when we're paying for it on a monthly basis. And then the other thing is, if we're going to deal with the publishers, the Amazons, the Microsofts, the Googles, the IBMs, we need somebody to be that first point of contact for us so we can get support services if we're going to be buying software as a service through their cloud. So there's a lot of availability for that today as well. So I guess when you look at the software lifecycle planning and all that, the first thing you want to figure out is really what you need. And let me explain that. So if you guys have anybody on the phone has ever entered into an agreement that's 3 years, I always use the term analysis paralysis. I'm guessing a lot of you have said, we know we have about 500 users or in some cases with our customers 10,000 users, but we don't really know how many desktops we may or may not have, or how many users are actually logging on. So you get into this phase of, I don't know exactly how much I want to commit to over a 3-year period. So with the new world of pay-as-you-go, you don't really have to, because if you end up buying too much up front and you don't need it, or frankly you don't even buy enough up front and then you need it, you don't have to plan so much anymore. You don't really have to determine these costs over 3 years like we talked about. I mean, we're going to be able to pay monthly, and we can probably set a budget in mind based upon our user count for those 3 years. But knowing what my budget looks like today, you don't necessarily have to know up front. What's interesting about this new model of putting the purchasing decision and really putting portals in front of people where they can buy their licensing on the fly is that when customers can actually go onto a portal and buy whatever it might be, Office 365 or CRM or some other Salesforce management platform, and they have the control of it, which is in a lot of cases I feel like the publisher or the manufacturer used to be the ones calling you and telling you what you ordered. It changes your purchasing decisions, so you feel like if I turn something on today and I turn it off tomorrow, I control it, which is a nice thing. And then again, once you're doing all this, managing that, it's an operational cost. It's a monthly cost. Managing it and making sure you're not over or underutilizing is key, and it's going to be critical as we move down the road because, like I was mentioning, I was in Las Vegas last week. We were talking a lot about Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services, and we were just talking about how people are building up clouds and building up these utility models, but the spend kind of creeped up on us, and we didn't have ways to manage it. So it's important that you know how to manage those OpEx costs. So bundles of software aren't necessary anymore. What I mean by that is traditionally vendors, and I'm going to use this specific in this case, Microsoft. If you guys have been entered into an enterprise agreement with them, or in other cases with other vendors before, traditionally they like to bundle their software. If you're a VMware partner, or like I say, a Microsoft partner, or a Google partner, they don't just want you to buy Google or Gmail. They want you to buy the whole G Suite of Google apps. Or Microsoft really wants to see you and your EA buy what's called the Enterprise CAL agreement or the Core CAL agreement, which bundles a ton of product together, which could include Office, your Windows Server, and maybe even your Windows desktop operating system. But do we need that for every single person in our organization? And I don't think in a lot of cases we do. So what we're finding is that being able to unbundle and the term I'm hearing is do these like microtransactions of just bits and pieces of what we need has been a game changer for a lot of people who are using this pay-as-you-go model. Sorry, I was trying to get, there we go. Okay. So one of the things that we're able to do today is really review budgets when we get into these pay-go models. So what's happening is what you're seeing on the screen here is what's called like a budget review thing, where you can actually look at what's happening on a daily basis in terms of software usage. So if, an example, if you are using a Microsoft Office 365 product, let's call it E3, which includes Microsoft Office, Microsoft Outlook, Microsoft Skype, and then there's a whole plethora of other tools in there, and you were able to budget and see what was going on within the usage, you might actually want to turn off components that you weren't using. Let's say you just weren't using Skype to do instant messaging and do web conferences. So again, having the ability to budget and review and see what's going on is a very unique feature in some of these portals today. Financially prepare. You want to be able to see usage across all of your different products that you're using. In this case, again, we kind of looked at Office 365 from Microsoft and looked at when things are happening from an activation perspective, which is all stuff we can view in the portals we built today. So we can see email activity for the month by user. We can look at OneDrive files as they continue to pile up, and we can look at how much data storage is increasing incrementally, and then make decisions financially where to store that data, whether it be inside of a Microsoft Azure platform or even moving things over into like an Amazon Web Services platform, because data is data, and in this day and age as we put more things online and become more digital, there's going to be places where things get less expensive. So being able to manage and monitor that is so important. So anyway, Office activations, you guys see it there, and then just Skype activity. Are our users really using Skype, or are a certain percentage of them using it? It can all be managed through these portals. So software budgeting and metering, that's kind of where this sums it up. Believe it or not, above and beyond the idea that we can buy software on a monthly basis as we need it, we also have the ability to meter and monitor and really budget what's happening in our software. So it's one thing, and I've heard this a lot from Microsoft, and other partners, where they've said to me, hey Sean, we feel like over time as people start to buy those products in the cloud on a pay by the use or pay by the person basis, it'll start to get out of control over time, and they're going to actually spend more than they used to do in these upfront commitments. I frankly think that that's possible, but at the same time, considering we're putting software budgeting and metering tools in place, place, we're going to be able to get notifications automatically that tell us, that are set with thresholds that tell us, hey, I want to know of my 1,000 users who have signed up a Skype account for, what's the usage like? Or if my server inside of AWS is at 80% capacity, do I turn it up to the next one, or do I spin it down into smaller ones? Or if I'm not using a server that I spun up inside of the public cloud or the utility cloud, should I automatically set up a trigger to turn it off? So beyond just buying these platforms, softwares, these utility-based compute models, you have to be able to monitor and really plan to manage these costs in the future. And I was lucky enough, I got to speak on a panel with a friend of mine. He's a CIO of a company out Western Digital, and we were talking last week a little bit about the ongoing management in the future and what we as CIOs have to be, what we have to look like, our makeup. And one of the things we talked about is we have to become more fiscally responsible and just fiscally minded and understand the financials of what's going on, because everything's being paid for on a monthly basis. And then we have to continue to become, as we are today, more operationally excellent and looking at not so much the infrastructure anymore, but the business process and what the executives in our organizations are asking us to build to automate things we do. And again, we don't have to go out and buy these big platforms anymore up front. We can consume them as we go. So if you guys want to pilot a big ERP or a CRM or any other type of line of business tool, it's easier and more affordable to do these days. So let me give you some math, and this is an interesting one because this talks to an actual customer that we worked with that's about 1,000 people, and they a very large brewing company that a lot of us are very much know. But anyway, and a simple way to do it is they went into a pay-as-you-go licensing model, and each seat, each license that they bought, and they actually bought Office 365, was $10 a month. Okay, so obviously when you could look at $10 a month over a 3-year commitment, or $10,000 a month is what they spend on that 1,000-seat license. Over a 3-year term, if they had committed up front in the old way of the enterprise commitment, they would have spent $360,000. But when we start looking at other things nowadays, like deployment times, I mean, I think I was conservative here, but average deployment times take, I'd say 3 to 6 months, but I stuck with 3. So what we did is we took a 3-month deployment time frame and divided out on a weekly basis how many seats would get deployed. So really the total upfront cost for the customers was actually $30,000, and then the total cost under pay-as-you-go, really this new modeling of licensing, was $16,185. So really in the first 3 months of doing this, we only paid for it as we used it. They were able to save $13,000. And the more these deployments, which in most traditional companies get pushed out, the more money you save. So think about that when you guys are looking at big licensing deals and moving to this pay-as-you-go model. So enterprise agreement changes. This kind of flips us over into a little bit of the customers who are on the phone, and I know we have a few of them who have been in the world of having enterprise agreements with Microsoft. So this year Microsoft announced sort of a bunch of new programs, and we're going to talk about a few today, but some of the big ones were just based around big changes to the enterprise agreement, which for people who don't know, enterprise agreements for companies typically over 250 seats, and they were agreements that committed you for a 3-year term. And every year, if your company grew or didn't grow, they would ask you to true up licensing and make sure that you kept up with whatever licensing usage you had. But the commitment level downward, if you said, we had to lay off, or we had an M&A, or we had a merger or an acquisition, and we had to reduce headcount, you were committed over that 3-year term. So this year a few things happened. Microsoft said we're going to announce a few new programs, with one called CSP, which we'll talk about in a second, which is called Cloud Solution Provider. And they also said that a lot of the traditional account managers that Microsoft have had in place are no longer going to manage the customer as a managed account. So a lot of those customers who or partners on the phone who used to have Microsoft account managers, they may no longer be there. And what Microsoft is hoping is that a lot of the partners in the channel who provide services can come in and really help them with ongoing procurement of licensing, management of licensing, and then frankly deploying the services that they purchased so they don't sit there on an agreement that they don't use. So there is kind of a new level of that partner technical sales team, which I mentioned, which is more of the partner channel. And then there's this whole new level of the ability to buy this licensing and automate licensing on a monthly basis, and we're going to show a little bit more of that in a few minutes. And then of course, access to the publishers like Microsoft and Amazon. Microsoft has really enabled, as have other partners, the ability for the partner to be that direct conduit considering there's an outage or a problem within their stack of cloud products. So an interesting change, and it's really something that a lot of customers have taken to and enjoy the fact that now we can do things on a monthly basis. So let's get to it. What is this whole monthly basis thing for, I guess, people who don't know? So Microsoft created a program called Cloud Solution Provider, okay? And I believe in the world today of the 700 or so odd thousand Microsoft partners, there's about 5,000 of them who are in the world as what's called CSPs. And you're probably getting marketing from them, you're probably getting calls, and you may not be. But at the same time, what CSP is it's a customer partnership with Microsoft where the partner can bill their customer and have them pay for only what they use for any Microsoft license today. So that includes products like Office 365. That includes very basic products like federation services or multi-factor authentication or Project or Visio. It's really a way to break out licensing and again pay by the user for only the tools that their user uses. So it's been a pretty interesting thing for the customer, and watching some of our customers over the last year come at us and say, wow, I love the program for so many reasons. As we talked about in the prior slide, I just deploy on these longer cycles, so I don't want to spend the money up front if I don't need to until I've actually consumed it. Another one has been we've seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions, so we don't know what size company we're going to be in the next 3 years, so having that flexibility to go up and down is great. A lot of companies have said, well, it seems like if I typically commit up front, do I get this discount do I get the same discount I get if I'm doing monthly? And the answer is, in most cases, yes. They've created this program to be competitive with the old commitments. I think what I hope and what the real goal was is that finally we are treating stuff like a software or pay-as-you-go cloud service, and that's what this program really is a monthly pay-as-you-go billing mechanism. So what are the benefits? Pay only what you use. There's no, if anybody's had an agreement that's on the enterprise before, there's no true-ups, okay? So at the end of the year, if you're, if you've really seen, you've added or removed licenses and you end up where you end up, the monthly billing turns into an operational expense like we talked about. So those terms are monthly, and if you decide after 1 month you don't want to do anything anymore, you can turn everything off. Microsoft, through the partner channel, is able to offer up to 20% off the licensing retail. So anybody who's seeing Office 365 online, if they're going through a CSP partner, hopefully they're getting a very good tier discount from that partner to help them out. And really what that partner should be doing is providing the services for these guys and really not trying to make margin off this licensing. But that should be there for you guys, a rebate on licensing. And then access to Microsoft. So the one thing Microsoft really wanted to do for anybody who's dealt with, getting to them in the past and making sure that if you needed help or service, Microsoft's enabled these Tier 1 CSP providers to be able to go in and call on behalf of the customer to get Microsoft support. And then frankly, Microsoft, if anybody has used or not used before, there are actual cash incentives that Microsoft throws out there around products that they really want to get in market. So everybody's familiar with Microsoft Azure. Everybody's hearing about Microsoft Office 365, and I'm sure other products within like Enterprise Mobility or now Enterprise Management Suite, or even Windows 10. Those are big pushes for Microsoft, as you can imagine why, as they compete in the field. So they're throwing dollars at it through the partner channel to make sure that things are getting deployed. So those things are still available to you, and if you were in an EA of old and you saw those before, they still exist today. So I thought this was an interesting slide. I mean, if anybody's been in any sort of Microsoft licensing agreement, small customer all the way up through big, unless you were just buying boxed products, from the store or off-the-shelf software as they call it, these were kind of the programs that were out there before. They had these large agreements at the top called direct EA and indirect EA. There's one that sits in between there that's available today and will continue to be available today called MPSA, Microsoft Products and Services, which if you scroll all the way to the right, you'll see kind of those 3-year terms at the 2 top tiers. And then as you see these MPSA, you're going to start to see these 1-year commitment terms under products called MPSA. So if you're looking for still a commitment and a shorter term, you might want to ask whoever you're talking to about licensing about MPSA. Then there's what we've been talking about a lot today, CSP, where it really is, it says to the right, a pay-go monthly subscription. So there is no prepay. This is a Microsoft slide. There actually is a month-to-month way to do this where you're not committed to anything. And again, it gives the partner, as we talked about, the services companies of this world, the ability to sell, transact, do the billing, and then obviously provide you guys ongoing management platforms like we talked about up above to really make sure we're managing and optimizing our spend in licensing. And then, of course, if you use them and you don't use some of the internal IT ongoing support, and that's really up to you as the customer. And then, of course, the old, for smaller businesses, a lot of just open licensing and what they call MOSP licensing, which, again, typically small business customers used it, but these were license agreements where you had sort of a certain amount of seats committed to Microsoft. So some of the tools that we're seeing, and this is one that we're really excited about for what we're calling Tier 1, Tier 2 CSP providers, and really for the customer, is a product called Snap. It's really, right now what we're seeing is sort of the channel's choice for the cloud marketplace. So to keep it really simple, it's a cloud marketplace for Microsoft Office and Azure licensing to be able to go out and really purchase anything you could think of Microsoft, from Outlook to Visio to Office to Azure to even some of the tools that you're hearing about like EMS and Active Directory Federation services and security tools from Microsoft. It is really a broken out list of SKUs from Microsoft that gives you everything you've had in your traditional agreements, but the ability to pay for them on a monthly basis. So this is a tool that's out there today, and it allows you to go in and do a lot of what we're calling software brokering to make sure that you're actually making your customer and or the customer have the ability to manage licenses and make sure they're optimizing spend. So it's an incredible tool for software management. To give you a little bit more about what it does is it's a control panel for the customer. It's which creates integrated bundles. It does real-time reporting. It actually integrates into third-party billing tools. It actually is tied to the Azure Marketplace, which is a nice feature to have if you're trying to actually buy Azure products and build them through this platform where there's no commitment up front. It actually gives you the capability to do ongoing cost management in Azure, which has been a big ask with partners I've talked to. How do I manage the ongoing spend of my user, my department, my Microsoft bill in general? It's just a big question out there. So this platform allows you to do that. It brings up incentives like we talked about in the slide before. I mean, if there's an incentive to deploy something like Office 365 or Microsoft Azure, it offers those incentives up to you. And then, of course, it allows you to buy services that are bundled. So you might want to buy a Microsoft EMS product with a Microsoft E3 product, or with just SharePoint alone. It allows you to bundle those type of services. So as you can see, we wanted to give kind of a snapshot of, sort of let you envision what it looks like. So the product catalog is really all of the Microsoft tools from their CRM products, which they're now calling Dynamics 365. And if anybody has any interest in learning more about that, we can always have a conversation offline. But Dynamics 365, so your AX products, your CRM products. It goes into your Skype and Azure products, your Exchange Online products, to keep it simple. But really, it's a complete catalog for Microsoft products broken down where you can buy seat by seat, add it to your cart, and then do pay-as-you-go monthly licensing. And then on top of that, this catalog, like we talked about, gives you those SKUs that actually have incentives on the back end from Microsoft. So if you go to buy Enterprise Mobility Suite from Microsoft and they have an incentive out there, it'll tell you, the customer or the partner you're working at, hey, this is something that you guys might be entitled to get funding for to help deploy. So a really neat intertwined product that helps you with your automation when it comes to buying products from Microsoft. So I wanted to make that one short. I know we scheduled for an hour. I felt it was Friday at lunch and everybody's hungry. So if there's any questions out there, I do have one here. So the question okay, so the question is really about that commitment again. So the person's asking, in most licensing agreements, aside from Microsoft, it's non-committal these days. Is this really what this is about? Yes. So, and they continue on. And is there really discounting involved? Yes. So this is a partner-driven. So whatever partner you're working with today, in this case, Managed Solution, for example, is a Tier 1, what's called CSP. So we're a provider of this type of licensing. So whatever partner you're working with today has the authorization to go in and help you with discounting. Hopefully they're using a cloud marketplace like we just showed you before to be able to help you and enable you, the customer, to go in and purchase licensing on the fly. And of course you can call whoever your account managers at those companies as well to do it. But hopefully they're giving you those type of, insights and capabilities. So like I say, psychologically the control's in your hand. But you can do it. There is discounts. I hope they offer them. And I also hope that as you guys have different workloads that you want to deploy, if there are incentives out there, they work with you and Microsoft to go out and get them. Here's another one. So the next question was, do you find any differences as it pertains to, you talked about utility computing, as it pertains to public cloud between the providers? Oh, that's a tough one. So we are meeting with a ton of organizations who are interested in public cloud. And when I say that, it could be, I'm seeing the 80-20 rule happen right now. Amazon and Azure seem to be the two most predominant cloud providers in the marketplace today. What I am finding is that we are working with companies to help them first do a discovery session with both the Azures of the world and the Amazons to really see what the different tools are that are out there. And just to give anybody who doesn't know much about public cloud a good feel, there is over 55 different new types of services you can consume inside of just like Microsoft's Azure Marketplace. So when your IT admins and systems guys come to us, the first step for a company like us is to educate you. Do we have a preference? As I've talked to my engineers, no. They're both at parity at this point in time. They do a lot of great things together. I think I'll give you the number 1 and 2 things we get asked. One is, what workloads do I start off with in the cloud? That's probably number 1. And traditionally, companies are looking at doing DR and different types of high availability. So building like a NetApp or an EMC virtual SAN in the cloud seems to be a popular thing to do. Or just using the cloud very quickly to spin up a quick virtual machine or several of them to do a quick development platform that might only last for a few weeks. So it kind of lets them dip their toe in the water and they like it. The second thing about public cloud people ask us about is cost. How do I manage the cost? And there are tools that we work with today to be able to give you cost by user, cost by department, and then cost by different provider, matter of fact, Amazon versus Azure versus Google, to be able to make sure that we're optimizing the cost across all of the places we're spending. So anybody who's a CIO or IT manager or even systems administrator on the phone, if your CFO's ever gotten a bill, and we've gotten calls from our customer CFOs, the first thing they ask you is, who's spending what where? Because if you're not careful with public cloud, people will build a ton of stuff, and it gets scary. So it's important to manage this stuff. I'm a big believer in ongoing management in the future and automating this stuff. So I hope that answers your question. And then, is every product offered through this new CSP platform from Microsoft? Good question. Okay. So today there are still a lot of on-premise tools available from Microsoft. For example, most companies still have and house Windows Server or SQL Server on-premise, although it can be bought inside of Azure or other platforms like Amazon or even Google. But most people want to still buy on-premise products for their servers. So you would have to combine up for the on-premise products today what's called either an EA agreement with the combination of CSP, which can absolutely be done, or you could even use what I showed you back there, that MPSA agreement, which can give you your on-premise SKUs that you need for the on-premise hardware and, I guess, software that remains. And so I guess what I tell people is this. CSP, when you think about it as everything that Microsoft makes cloud-based, everything from Office 365 to Azure to ERP and CRM products, all the way down to the projects online and all of the above. CSP even now offers the desktop operating system with Windows 10. So if you want to do a pay-as-you-go license for like a Windows 10 user, you can do that through CSP as well. So sometimes it's a combination of both, not always, but for the most part there is on-premise licensing needed today. So we do see a lot of the mixed enterprise agreement with CSP or even Microsoft Products and Services Agreement, which is called MPSA, with CSP. So I hope that clarifies. So I think that's it. Keep in touch with us. Like I say, I'm trying to do as many as I can to help educate the audience out there who's looking at how they do licensing going forward. But I appreciate your time today. Enjoy your weekend. And if you have any questions, of course, give us a call. Thanks, guys.